Welcome back to Creating Your Life. This is episode 20, Motivation and the Power of Authorities. Mark Alexander back for more. This is Motivation, Power of Authorities, and we're going to look at motivation from a different angle. External motivation versus internal motivation. One way of thinking about motivation that we're all kind of familiar with is something called restrictive motivation. This is motivation by threats, fear, or coercion when somebody wants to force you to do something. And this is what happens sometimes, especially in my day and age, parents would spank their children. And so if you don't do something, you're going to get spanked. You can imagine what's that. It can be effective, sure. But it's external, and it's not always the best way of doing things, obviously. There's a kind of subcategory of this called inhibitive motivation. It's something that can arise from this kind of external threat and the way it's implemented. You can imagine, for example, being raised where coming home late is a bad thing, and your mother says, don't be late or something bad's going to happen, and you're late, and she slaps you. And then the next time you're late, she kicks you in the shins. And the next time you're late, she throws you down the stairs. Now, it's a bit exaggerated, but the idea is that with repeated feedback where something like this happens, an interesting thing happens. It becomes kind of this anxiety that starts developing whenever you're going to be late. So you can imagine that even when your mother dies, once the mother dies, the child still can have that implanted in them. It becomes automatic because remember, the subconscious repository stores anything that's repeated. So if there's negative feedback on something over and over again, it becomes a part of you. So that even though the parent is gone, person's still going to feel that being late is bad, and they'll still continue to, run red lights, for example, to get to a doctor's appointment because being late is bad, and it doesn't matter that the parent isn't there. It's become a part of them. It becomes a kind of a twitchy thing, a kind of reactive feeling. What makes it even worse is if such a person, for example, becomes a manager in a company or a boss of a business, not only is it triggered within them when they're going to be late, it gets triggered when anybody's going to be late. So what happens is they start trying to control everybody. Hey, don't be late. Something bad's going to happen. Anytime you get into this kind of situation, you have a person trying to solve this kind of inner twitchy, reactive issue by controlling the world, by controlling the universe, by controlling other people. And so the rules get laid down and the behaviors start changing. It's a very poor way of managing people, obviously. It's much more important if people start dealing with themselves. And this is where constructive motivation comes in. The idea that all real and lasting change comes within the person. You can't coerce people into becoming better, but the idea is if you can inspire people with a goal and they can inspire themselves with goals, then that creative energy comes from within to reach the goal and make the changes. It's important to you because what is it in your life that you get automatically twitchy about? And you want to change people to relax that sense of tension that's in you. You can sometimes see that you're going to actually cause more harm than good by not resolving it within yourself, but by controlling the world. And this is why many people who try to do good in the world, if it comes from this twitchy, reactive, emotionally responsive state for something that they have a problem with, they may be actually causing more harm than good by trying to control people outside of them. One of the things that's important to understand in terms of motivation and in terms of the way things work is whatever you choose to do, like it. Whatever you end up doing, love it. Become a chooser and like and love what you do. Ask yourself, where's your locus of control? Is it interior or exterior? Are you choosing your responses? Because no matter what happens to you, you can choose how to respond. More and more freedom comes in this way. You're the creator of yourself. You sculpt yourself. It doesn't matter what happens to you. What matters is how do you respond. In my case, I take that accountability up to 100%. Somebody I don't know could run up to me on the street, slap me, run off. I'll never see them again. I'm accountable for that. I'm the one that somehow set that in motion. I know it sounds a bit extreme, but the idea is I don't allow any victim consciousness in my life. I do not allow any external causes. Sure, I can trace some of these to apparently external causes, but since I'm in charge of my responses, since I choose where I'm going to be, when, and with whom I'm going to hang out, I am ultimately responsible for everything in my life. And if I set it up that way, I have higher self-efficacy, I have a higher sense of that locus of control being within me, and I'm that much more powerful creating my life. I'm 100% accountable for everything, not allowing any victim consciousness in me. There's something called the Pygmalion effect, and this relates to the power of authorities. And a lot of people just don't realize how powerful authorities are when they give them this power, or even themselves as a powerful authority. This goes back to a 1968 study where some researchers went into a classroom. Pygmalion is a Greek myth, and it's the story of a sculptor who sculpted a woman in marble. And she was so beautiful, he sculpted the most beautiful woman he could, and he fell in love with her. And a goddess saw this love and brought the sculpture to life. And the idea is that the sculptor created and brought to life the one he loved. The authors of the study called it the Pygmalion effect for this reason. They went into a 4th grade classroom at the beginning of the school year. They went up to the teacher and said, we're going to test all of your students, and we're going to tell you who are the high performers. And so they went in, they tested everybody, and they gave the teacher a list of all the high performers, all the high achievers, all the ones with the greatest potential according to the tests. At the end of the school year, they came back. Again, they tested all the students, and sure enough, all the ones they had identified as the high achievers were the ones that were the highest achieving in class. Here's the caveat, though. The researchers did not really give a test. What they did is they randomly selected students and just gave the names of those students to the teacher. In other words, the teacher had this vision of who the high achievers were and who the low achievers were. And based on how the teacher treated them, like Pygmalion and the sculpture, the teacher ended up kind of sculpting the students towards what the teacher expected them to be. It's an incredible thing. So based on the picture that the teacher had, it governed the response the teacher had and created that in others. In other words, what you think, feel, and assume about other people can have an effect on them. It's important to understand the power of authorities. Parents can be, they can have a picture of their children and obviously be powerful authorities. To an 8-year-old, a 10-year-old is a powerful authority they look up to. Your peers can be authorities. You may think about a time when you were in school where you or someone you know was identified as the klutz, the one person who would just naturally be klutzy, and sure enough they were. Years later, they've grown out of that, they're not like that, but they come back to a reunion, see the same people, and they say, hey, Mark, hey, how's the klutz doing? And suddenly they're back into that mode and they start behaving that way. It's the same kind of thing that can happen when you're years away from your parents, but every time you go home, you become their child again, and suddenly you're acting differently because of the expectations or the pictures people have of you. It also explains why in different groups, you have a higher level of confidence with this group, but less confidence with another group, and you'll act differently because of the pictures people hold. The pictures people hold of you are very powerful, and it's important to understand that it's kind of an exerting energy that can encompass people. And not only do you have to be aware of the power that other people may have in influencing you, you also have to be aware of the power you have in influencing others. Well, that's all for now. Next time we're going to talk about rites of passage. In the meantime, go to my website at marcandrealexander.com and you will be able to read some blog posts and see the books that I have.